Samuel Johnson was an English writer, poet, essayist, critic, and lexicographer who lived in the 18th century. He is considered one of the most important figures of his time, and his contributions to literature and the English language are still felt today. Johnson was born in Lichfield, Staffordshire, on September 18, 1709, and he was the son of a bookseller. He attended Pembroke College, Oxford, but he left without a degree due to financial difficulties. Johnson's literary career began in the 1730s, and he quickly established himself as a prominent figure in the London literary scene. He wrote for several periodicals, including the Gentleman's Magazine, and he published his first major work, London, in 1738. This poem was an instant success, and it established Johnson as a major literary figure. In addition to his poetry, Johnson is perhaps best known for his Dictionary of the English Language, which was published in 1755. This monumental work took Johnson nearly a decade to complete, and it was the first comprehensive English dictionary. Johnson's dictionary was a major achievement, and it helped to standardize the English language. Johnson was also a prolific essayist, and he wrote for several periodicals throughout his career. His essays covered a wide range of topics, including politics, religion, and literature. Johnson's essays were known for their wit, insight, and moral wisdom. In addition to his literary achievements, Johnson was also a devout Christian, and he wrote extensively on religious topics. He was a member of the Church of England, and he was known for his conservative views on religion and morality. Johnson died on December 13, 1784, at the age of 75. He is remembered today as one of the greatest literary figures of the 18th century, and his contributions to the English language are still felt today. His Dictionary of the English Language remains a landmark achievement, and his essays and poetry continue to be read and studied by scholars around the world. Here are some of his most famous quotes. "Love is the wisdom of the fool and the folly of the wise. Women have two weapons, cosmetics and tears. The disturbers of our happiness, in this world, are our desires, our griefs, and our fears. The next best thing to knowing something is knowing where to find it. He that wishes to see his country robbed of its rights cannot be a patriot. A wise man will make haste to forgive, because he knows the true value of time, and will not suffer it to pass away in unnecessary pain. When once the forms of civility are violated, there remains little hope of return to kindness or decency. It is better to live rich than to die rich. A fishing rod is a stick with a hook at one end and a fool at the other. Whatever the motive for the insult, it is always best to overlook it, for folly doesn't deserve resentment, and malice is punished by neglect. You hesitate to stab me with a word, and know not, silence is the sharper sword. All intellectual improvement arises from leisure. A man's mind grows narrow in a narrow place. A decent provision for the poor is the true test of civilization. The law is the last result of human wisdom acting upon human experience for the benefit of the public. Men more frequently require to be reminded than informed. The habit of looking on the bright side of every event is worth more than £1,000 a year. Language is the dress of thought. Curiosity is, in great and generous minds, the first passion and the last. I never desire to converse with a man who has written more than he has read. A horse that can count to 10 is a remarkable horse, not a remarkable mathematician. To be free, it is not enough to beat the system, one must beat the system every day. A man who both spends and saves money is the happiest man, because he has both enjoyments. The true measure of a man is how he treats someone who can do him absolutely no good. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Curiosity is one of the most permanent and certain characteristics of a vigorous intellect. Never trust your tongue when your heart is bitter. Language is the dress of thought, every time you talk your mind is on parade. Fraud and falsehood only dread examination. Truth invites it. He who has so little knowledge of human nature as to seek happiness by changing anything but his own disposition will waste his life in fruitless efforts. Patriotism is the last refuge of the scoundrel. What we hope ever to do with ease, we must learn first to do with diligence. The future is purchased by the present. There are two types of knowledge. One is knowing a thing. The other is knowing where to find it. Books, like friends, should be few and well chosen. The wise man applauds he who he thinks most virtuous, the rest of the world applauds the wealthy. You can never be wise unless you love reading. Kindness is in our power, even when fondness is not. Prejudice is a great time saver. You can form opinions without having to get the facts. Prejudice not being founded on reason cannot be removed by argument. Advice is seldom welcome. Those who need it most, like it least. Life affords no higher pleasure than that of surmounting difficulties. If your determination is fixed, I do not counsel you to despair. Few things are impossible to diligence and skill. Great works are performed not by strength, but perseverance. Courage is the greatest of all virtues, because if you haven't courage, you may not have an opportunity to use any of the others. Each person's work is always a portrait of himself. Truth allows no choice. None but a fool worries about things he cannot influence. To preserve health is a moral and religious duty, for health is the basis of all social virtues, and we can be useful no longer than while we are well. Exert your talents, and distinguish yourself, and don't think of retiring from the world, until the world will be sorry that you retire. When a man knows he is to be hanged in a fortnight, it concentrates his mind wonderfully. He who waits to do a great deal of good at once will never do anything. My dear friend, clear your mind of cant. Our aspirations are our possibilities. Nothing will ever be attempted if all possible objections must first be overcome. Power is not sufficient evidence of truth. Prejudice, not being founded on reason, cannot be removed by argument. Your manuscript is both good and original, but the part that is good is not original, and the part that is original is not good. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing, it only hastens fools to rush in where angels fear to tread. Nature has given women so much power that the law has very wisely given them little. Whoever thinks of going to bed before 12 o'clock is a scoundrel. Knock the tea off the cant. People need to be reminded more often than they need to be instructed. Ignorance, when it is voluntary, is criminal, and he may be properly charged with evil who refused to learn how he might prevent it. Integrity without knowledge is weak and useless, and knowledge without integrity is dangerous and dreadful. It is better to suffer wrong than to do it, and happier to be sometimes cheated than not to trust. The majority have no other reason for their opinions than that they are the fashion. What is written without effort is in general read without pleasure. The first step to greatness is to be honest. No people can be great who have ceased to be virtuous. Liberty is, to the lowest rank of every nation, little more than the choice of working or starving. If you are idle, be not solitary, if you are solitary, be not idle. Ignorance, when it is voluntary, is criminal. Bachelors have consciences, married men have wives. Pleasure is very seldom found where it is sought, our brightest blazes of gladness are commonly kindled by unexpected sparks. We are all prompted by the same motives, all deceived by the same fallacies, all animated by hope, obstructed by danger, entangled by desire, and seduced by pleasure. Curiosity is the thirst of the soul. Sorrow is the mere rust of the soul. Activity will cleanse and brighten it. What is easy is seldom excellent. The true genius is a mind of large general powers, accidentally determined to some particular direction. Some desire is necessary to keep life in motion. Power is gradually stealing away from the many to the few, because the few are more vigilant and consistent. Grief is a species of idleness. Sir, I have found you in argument, but I am not obliged to find you in understanding. It matters not how a man dies, but how he lives. Almost every man wastes part of his life attempting to display qualities which he does not possess. There must always be a struggle between a father and son, while one aims at power and the other at independence. Read over your compositions, and whenever you meet with a passage which you think is particularly fine, strike it out. Whatever is formed for long duration arrives slowly to its maturity. Indolence is the devil's cushion. Every man is rich or poor according to the proportion between his desires and his enjoyments. Worth seeing, yes, but not worth going to see. The true art of memory is the art of attention. Those who attain any excellence commonly spend life in one pursuit, for excellence is not often gained upon easier terms. The misery of men proceeds not from any single crush of overwhelming evil, but from small vexations continually repeated. When there is no hope, there can be no endeavor. I had rather see the portrait of a dog that I know, than all the allegorical paintings they can show me in the world. Pride is a vice, which pride itself inclines every man to find in others, and to overlook in himself. Life is a progress from want to want, not from enjoyment to enjoyment. Whatever enlarges hope will also exalt courage. The highest panegyric, therefore, that private virtue can receive, is the praise of servants. Shame arises from the fear of men, conscience from the fear of God. He that travels in theory has no inconveniences. Praise, like gold and diamonds, owes its value only to its scarcity. To be happy at home is the ultimate result of all ambition. Deviation from nature is deviation from happiness. The dangers gather as the treasures rise. Your aspirations are your possibilities. No man will be found in whose mind airy notions do not sometimes tyrannize, and force him to hope or fear beyond the limits of sober probability. Such seems to be the disposition of men, that whatever makes a distinction produces rivalry. Gratitude is a fruit of great cultivation, you do not find it among gross people. Whoever envies another confesses his superiority. It very seldom happens to a man that his business is his pleasure. No one is much pleased with a companion who does not increase, in some respect, their fondness for themselves. There is a frightful interval between the seed and the timber. The power of punishment is to silence, not to confute. If you want to be a writer, then write. Write every day. Slander is the revenge of a coward, and dissimulation of his defense. Every old man complains of the growing depravity of the world, of the petulance and insolence of the rising generation. From thee, great God, we spring, to thee we tend, path, motive, guide, original, and end. Quotation is a good thing, there is a community of thought in it. Life affords no higher pleasure than that of surmounting difficulties, passing from one step of success to another, forming new wishes and seeing them gratified. When any calamity is suffered, the first thing to be remembered is, how much has been escaped. Money and time are the heaviest burdens of life, and the unhappiest of all mortals are those who have more of either than they know how to use. The superiority of some men is merely local. They are great because their associates are little. In all pointed sentences, some degree of accuracy must be sacrificed to conciseness. There is nothing which has yet been contrived by men, by which so much happiness is produced as by a good tavern. Those who do not feel pain seldom think that it is felt. The happiest part of a man's life is what he passes lying awake in bed in the morning. With an unquiet mind, neither exercise, nor diet, nor physic can be of much use. When making your choice in life, do not neglect to live. No man was ever great by imitation. Cucumber should be well sliced, dressed with pepper and vinegar, and then thrown out. Outrage is reckoned the greatest of all virtues, because, unless a man has that virtue, he has no security for preserving any other. Self-confidence is the first requisite to great undertakings. There are in every age new errors to be rectified and new prejudices to be opposed. Health is certainly more valuable than money, because it is by health that money is procured. How small of all that human hearts endure / that part which laws or kings can cause or cure. Don't tell me of deception, a lie is a lie, whether it be a lie to the eye or a lie to the ear. A man may be so much of everything that he is nothing of anything. Books have always a secret influence on the understanding. All the arguments which are brought to represent poverty as no evil show it evidently to be a great evil. No man can taste the fruits of autumn while he is delighting his scent with the flowers of spring. The only end of writing is to enable readers better to enjoy life or better to endure it. Exercise is labor without weariness. I know not any crime so great that a man could contrive to commit as poisoning the sources of eternal truth. As I know more of mankind, I expect less of them, and am ready now to call a man a good man upon easier terms than I was formerly. The joy of life is variety. The tenderest love requires to be rekindled by intervals of absence. What I gained by being in France was learning to be better satisfied with my own country. Parents are by no means exempt from the intoxication of dominion. No member of a society has a right to teach any doctrine contrary to what the society holds to be true. A generous and elevated mind is distinguished by nothing more certainly than an eminent degree of curiosity. There can be no friendship without confidence, and no confidence without integrity. Few things are impossible to diligence and skill. Wine makes a man better pleased with himself. I do not say that it makes him more pleasing to others. Knowledge is of two kinds. We know a subject ourselves, or we know where we can find information upon it. To hear complaints is wearisome alike to the wretched and the happy. Employment and hardships prevent melancholy. Dictionaries are like watches, the worst is better than none and the best cannot be expected to go quite true. A man is in general better pleased when he has a good dinner upon his table, than when his wife talks Greek. Agriculture not only gives riches to a nation, but the only riches she can call her own. Assertion is not argument. To contradict the statement of an opponent is not proof that you are correct. Pity is not natural to men. Children always are cruel. Savages are always cruel. As the mind must govern the hands, so in every society the men of intelligence must direct the men of labor. A man seldom thinks with more earnestness of anything than he does of his dinner. The Irish are a fair people, they never speak well of one another. Every man has some favorite topic of conversation, on which, by a feigned seriousness of attention, he may be drawn to expatiate without end. The natural flights of the human mind are not from pleasure to pleasure, but from hope to hope. Getting money is not all a man's business. To cultivate kindness is a valuable part of the business of life. Poverty has, in large cities, very different appearances. It is often concealed in splendor, and often in extravagance. Every man has something to do which he neglects. Every man has faults to conquer which he delays to combat. The number of such as live without the ardor of inquiry is very small, though many content themselves with cheap amusements, and waste their lives in researches of no importance. That observation which is called knowledge of the world will be found much more frequently to make men cunning than good. It is not from reason and prudence that people marry, but from inclination. Nature never gives everything at once. He that will enjoy the brightness of sunshine, must quit the coolness of the shade. Abstinence is as easy to me as temperance would be difficult. One of the disadvantages of wine is that it makes a man mistake words for thoughts. A translator is to be like his author, it is not his business to excel him. He that fails in his endeavors after wealth or power will not long retain either honesty or courage. When men come to like a sea life, they are not fit to live on land. It is commonly a weak man who marries for love. It is a most mortifying reflection for a man to consider what he has done, compared to what he might have done. The business of life is to go forward. A person loves to review his own mind. That is the use of a diary, or journal. The world is like a grand staircase, some are going up and some are going down. Excellence in any department can be attained only by the labor of a lifetime, it is not to be purchased at a lesser price. Man's chief merit consists in resisting the impulses of his nature. It is the just doom of laziness and gluttony to be inactive without ease and drowsy without tranquility. Every man who attacks my belief, diminishes in some degree my confidence in it, and therefore makes me uneasy, and I am angry with him who makes me uneasy. We are more pained by ignorance than delighted by instruction. To neglect at any time preparation for death is to sleep on our post at a siege, to omit it in old age is to sleep at an attack. The longer we live, the more we think, and the higher the value we put on friendship and tenderness towards parents and friends. Without frugality none can be rich, and with it very few would be poor. Combinations of wickedness would overwhelm the world, by the advantage which licentious principles afford, did not those who have long practiced perfidy grow faithless to each other. While an author is yet living, we estimate his powers by his worst performance, and when he is dead, we rate him by his best. The two offices of memory are collection and distribution. Prosperity's right hand is industry and her left hand is frugality. Judgment is forced upon us by experience. Politics are now nothing more than means of rising in the world. Revenge is an act of passion, vengeance of justice. Injuries are revenged, crimes are avenged. Slavery is now nowhere more patiently endured than in countries once inhabited by the zealots of liberty. We have less reason to be surprised or offended when we find others differ from us in opinion, because we very often differ from ourselves. Resentment is a union of sorrow with malignity, a combination of a passion which all endeavor to avoid with a passion which all concur to detest. Guilt once harbored in the conscious breast, intimidates the brave, degrades the great. If we estimate dignity by immediate usefulness, agriculture is undoubtedly the first and noblest science. Shakespeare never had more than 6 lines together without a fault. Lexicographer, a writer of dictionaries, a harmless drudge, that busies himself in tracing the original, and detailing the signification of words. Criticism, though dignified from the earliest ages by the labors of men eminent for knowledge and sagacity, has not yet attained the certainty and stability of science. In general those parents have the most reverence who most deserve it, for he that lives well cannot be despised. To strive with difficulties, and to conquer them, is the highest human felicity. Where grief is fresh, any attempt to divert it only irritates. Every man thinks meanly of himself for not having been a soldier, or not having been at sea. A man used to vicissitudes is not easily dejected. To make dictionaries is dull work. Misfortune should always be expected. Tea's proper use is to amuse the idle, and relax the studious, and dilute the full meals of those who cannot use exercise, and will not use abstinence. He was dull in a new way, and that made many think him great. Paradise Lost is a book that, once put down, is very hard to pick up again. A man will turn over half a library to make one book. Subordination tends greatly to human happiness. Were we all upon an equality, we should have no other enjoyment than mere animal pleasure. I would rather be attacked than unnoticed. For the worst thing you can do to an author is to be silent as to his works. The love of life is necessary to the vigorous prosecution of any undertaking. The vicious count their years, virtuous their acts. Abuse is often of service. There is nothing so dangerous to an author as silence. He that is much flattered soon learns to flatter himself. Remember that nothing will supply the want of prudence, and that negligence and irregularity long continued will make knowledge useless, wit ridiculous, and genius contemptible. If pleasure was not followed by pain, who would forbear it? How is it that we hear the loudest yelps for liberty among the drivers of Negroes? It is a hopeless endeavor to unite the contrarieties of spring and winter, it is unjust to claim the privileges of age, and retain the playthings of childhood. Fine clothes are good only as they supply the want of other means of procuring respect. He that is already corrupt is naturally suspicious, and he that becomes suspicious will quickly become corrupt. To keep your secret is wisdom, but to expect others to keep it is folly. Wise married women don't trouble themselves about infidelity in their husbands. Repentance, however difficult to be practiced, is, if it be explained without superstition, easily understood. Repentance is the relinquishment of any practice from the conviction that it has offended God. At 77 it is time to be in earnest. The synonym of usury is ruin. The great effect of friendship is beneficence, yet by the first act of uncommon kindness it is endangered. Disease generally begins that equality which death completes. I have always said the first Whig was the devil. Distance either of time or place is sufficient to reconcile weak minds to wonderful relations. It is better to suffer wrong than to do it. Love is only one of many passions. Much may be made of a Scotchman, if he be caught young. He that voluntarily continues in ignorance, is guilty of all the crimes which ignorance produces. Discord generally operates in little things, it is inflamed, by contrariety of taste oftener than principles. The equity of Providence has balanced peculiar sufferings with peculiar enjoyments. Classical quotation is the parole of literary men all over the world. The worst evils are those that never arrive. He that accepts protection, stipulates obedience. The inevitable consequence of poverty is dependence. Reproof should not exhaust its power upon petty failings. Reason and truth will prevail at last. In the motive lies the good or ill. A writer who obtains his full purpose loses himself in his own luster. People may be taken in once, who imagine that an author is greater in private life than other men. Admiration and love are like being intoxicated with champagne, judgment and friendship are like being enlivened. No man can fall into contempt but those who deserve it. Unconstraint is the grace of conversation. The greatest part of a writer's time is spent in reading in order to write. A man will turn over half a library to make a book. Gratitude is a species of justice. No man hates him at whom he can laugh. Wealth is nothing in itself, it is not useful but when it departs from us. It is observed of gold, by an old epigrammatist, that to have it is to be in fear, and to want it is to be in sorrow. The chief glory of every people arises from its authors. Truth, sir, is a cow which will yield such people no more milk, and so they are gone to milk the bull. He who does not mind his belly, will hardly mind anything else. Always, sir, set a high value on spontaneous kindness. No one ever became great by imitation. No money is better spent than what is laid out for domestic satisfaction. Of the blessings set before you make your choice, and be content. No man is a hypocrite in his pleasures. A writer only begins a book. A reader finishes it. I had done all that I could, and no man is well pleased to have his all neglected, be it ever so little. We seldom learn the true want of what we have till it is discovered that we can have no more. Curiosity is one of the permanent and certain characteristics of a vigorous intellect. Every advance into knowledge opens new prospects, and produces new incitements to farther progress. In order that all men might be taught to speak truth, it is necessary that all likewise should learn to hear it. Hope is necessary in every condition. No man was more foolish when he had not a pen in his hand, or more wise when he had. A vow is a snare for sin. Virtue is too often merely local. Praise, like gold and diamonds, owes its value only to its scarcity. It becomes cheap as it becomes vulgar, and will no longer raise expectation or animate enterprise. If I have said something to hurt a man once, I shall not get the better of this by saying many things to please him. So many objections may be made to everything, that nothing can overcome them but the necessity of doing something. Treating your adversary with respect is striking soft in battle. Every state of society is as luxurious as it can be. Men always take the best they can get. That we must all die, we always knew, I wish I had sooner remembered it. There are few things that we so unwillingly give up, even in advanced age, as the supposition that we still have the power of ingratiating ourselves with the fair sex. We love to overlook the boundaries which we do not wish to pass. I hope I shall never be deterred from detecting what I think a cheat, by the menaces of a ruffian. A wise man is cured of ambition by ambition itself, his aim is so exalted that riches, office, fortune, and favor cannot satisfy him. I am not so lost in lexicography as to forget that words are the daughters of earth, and that things are the sons of heaven. A book should teach us to enjoy life, or to endure it. Life protracted is protracted woe. In this work are exhibited, in a very high degree, the two most engaging powers of an author. New things are made familiar, and familiar things are made new. It is common to overlook what is near by keeping the eye fixed on something remote. Fear is implanted in us as a preservative from evil. Riches seldom make their owners rich. Words are but the signs of ideas. The triumph of hope over experience. The peculiar doctrine of Christianity is that of a universal sacrifice and perpetual propitiation. The usual fortune of complaint is to excite contempt more than pity. A married man has many cares, but a bachelor no pleasures. Do not accustom yourself to consider debt only as an inconvenience, you will find it a calamity. Sir, a man who cannot get to heaven in a green coat, will not find his way thither the sooner in a grey one. A man ought to read just as inclination leads him, for what he reads as a task will do him little good. Oats. A grain, which in England is generally given to horses, but in Scotland supports the people. When a man marries a widow, his jealousies revert to the past. No man is as good as his wife says her first husband was. I have adopted the Roman sentiment, that it is more honorable to save a citizen than to kill an enemy. The gloomy and the resentful are always found among those who have nothing to do or who do nothing. All history was at first oral. We consider ourselves as defective in memory, either because we remember less than we desire, or less than we suppose others to remember. Cruel with guilt, and daring with despair, the midnight murderer bursts the faithless bar, invades the sacred hour of silent rest and leaves, unseen, a dagger in your breast. Most minds are the slaves of external circumstances, and conform to any hand that undertakes to mold them. No man but a blockhead ever wrote except for money. Poetry is the art of uniting pleasure with truth. He who would govern his actions by the laws of virtue must regulate his thoughts by those of reason. Want of tenderness is want of parts, and is no less a proof of stupidity than depravity. Wit will never make a man rich, but there are places where riches will always make a wit. The feeling of friendship is like that of being comfortably filled with roast beef, love, like being enlivened with champagne. Politeness is one of those advantages which we never estimate rightly but by the inconvenience of its loss. It is unpleasing to represent our affairs to our own disadvantage, yet it is necessary to shew the evils which we desire to be removed. When a man is tired of London, he is tired of life, for there is in London all that life can afford. We may take fancy for a companion, but must follow reason as our guide. Modern writers are the moons of literature. They shine with reflected light, with light borrowed from the ancients. Between falsehood and useless truth there is little difference. As gold which he cannot spend will make no man rich, so knowledge which cannot apply will make no man wise. Life, to be worthy of a rational being, must be always in progression. We must always purpose to do more or better than in time past. We go from anticipation to anticipation, not from satisfaction to satisfaction. Reason will by degrees submit to absurdity, as the eye is in time accommodated to darkness. A man who exposes himself when he is intoxicated, has not the art of getting drunk. By seeing London, I have seen as much of life as the world can show. Many things difficult to design prove easy to performance. He that would be superior to external influences must first become superior to his own passions. Wine gives great pleasure, and every pleasure is of itself a good. It is a good, unless counterbalanced by evil. The hour of reformation is always delayed. Every delay gives vice another opportunity of fortifying itself by habit. Round numbers are always false. The eye of the mind, like that of the body, can only extend its view to new objects, by losing sight of those which are now before it. Bounty always receives part of its value from the manner in which it is bestowed. I would not give half a guinea to live under one form of government rather than another. It is of no moment to the happiness of an individual. Every man has a right to utter what he thinks truth, and every other man has a right to knock him down for it. Martyrdom is the test. Sir, I did not count your glasses of wine, why should you number up my cups of tea? I am always sorry when any language is lost, because languages are the pedigrees of nations. Almost all absurdity of conduct arises from the imitation of those who we cannot resemble. In misery's darkest cavern known, his useful care was ever nigh where hopeless anguish poured his groan, and lonely want returned to die. Laws teach us to know when we commit injury and when we suffer it. All wonder is the effect of novelty on ignorance. Perhaps man is the only being that can properly be called idle. Apologies are seldom of any use. Admiration begins where acquaintance ceases. Every man is, or hopes to be, an idler. We are perpetually moralists, but we are geometricians only by chance. Our intercourse with intellectual nature is necessary, our speculations upon matter are voluntary, and at leisure. Hunger is never delicate. Contempt is a kind of gangrene which, if it seizes one part of a character, corrupts all the rest by degrees. An infallible characteristic of meanness is cruelty. It is very common for us to desire most what we are least qualified to obtain. A blaze first pleases and then tires the sight. Dishonor waits on perfidy. A man should blush to think of falsehood, it is the crime of cowards. All power of fancy over reason is a degree of madness. In sovereignty there are no gradations. The resolution of the combat is seldom equal to the vehemence of the charge. In all pleasures hope is a considerable part. There are few minds to which tyranny is not delightful. See nations slowly wise, and meanly just, to buried merit raise the tardy bust. To prevent evil is the great end of government, the end for which vigilance and severity are properly employed. Much is due to those who first broke the way to knowledge, and left only to their successors the task of smoothing it. I would be loath to speak ill of any person who I do not know deserves it, but I am afraid he is an attorney. To have the management of the mind is a great art, and it may be attained in a considerable degree by experience and habitual exercise. Music is the only sensual pleasure without vice. Just praise is only a debt, but flattery is a present. Most men think indistinctly, and therefore cannot speak with exactness. What a strange narrowness of mind now is that, to think the things we have not known are better than the things we have known. A man who has not been in Italy is always conscious of an inferiority. Those that have done nothing in life are not qualified to judge of those that have done little. To forget, or pretend to do so, to return a borrowed article, is the meanest sort of petty theft. The general remedy of those who are uneasy without knowing the cause is change of place. The use of traveling is to regulate imagination by reality. Cautious age suspects the flattering form, and only credits what experience tells. He that applauds him who does not deserve praise, is endeavoring to deceive the public. He that hisses in malice or sport, is an oppressor and a robber. It is surely very narrow policy that supposes money to be the chief good. You despise a man for avarice, but you do not hate him. Bashfulness may sometimes exclude pleasure, but seldom opens any avenue to sorrow or remorse. He who praises everybody, praises nobody. Hope is itself a species of happiness. Wickedness is always easier than virtue, for it takes the short cut to everything. Misery and shame are nearly allied.